Yo, what's going on? Mike from Mike Talk Sports. So after starting his UFC career 2-0, he's currently 1-2 in his last 3 UFC fights. What is next for Terrance McKinney? To start off the video, I thought I would share a statistic that really sums up Terrance McKinney as an MMA fighter. He has 18 fights under his belt. In 18 fights, he's 13-3. 3 out of those 18 fights have gone past the first round, and when they do, he's 1-2 in those fights. Terrance McKinney is a guy who, if you want to say he starts fast, man, is that a drastic understatement. This guy comes out and wants to knock you out in the first minute of the fight, which is why on the regional scene, he made a lot of noise, and on the regional scene, I, along with a lot of MMA fans, notice him and were like, hey, UFC, you got to sign this kid. He's so entertaining. I always love a nice, entertaining fighter who's going to stand and bang on the feet, wants to knock you out or get knocked out in the first round. I appreciate the entertainment value from Terrance McKinney, but once you get into the UFC, you need to start prioritizing wins over entertainment. That doesn't mean completely throw entertainment out the window, but that means you need to start to build a solid career while still building your fan base. And that's something that Terrance McKinney has not been able to find the perfect balance between. He got somewhat exposed in his last fight against Ismael Bonfim. Ismael is a great boxer, so stylistically it wasn't the greatest matchup for Terrance McKinney. But he got somewhat exposed in that fight if you watch that fight. And I'm going to break down some of the tendencies that is really prevalent in all of his fights and that Ismael really exposed. So people look at that flying knockout with the flying knee and say, hey, it's a flying knee knockout, kind of lucky, not lucky at all. It was perfectly set up. It was without a mouth guard, so it was an extremely damaging KO. It's one of those knockouts I look at and say, I don't even care that you're 28 years old. You should probably take like 6 months until your next fight because it was a gruesome, gruesome knockout. And just getting into some of the tendencies that Terrance McKinney kind of got exposed in this fight, he's just incredibly offensive. Now, when you talk about his grappling, his jiu-jitsu is good. His offensive wrestling is okay. We've seen it displayed in a couple of his fights on the regional scene, a couple fights in the UFC. But for Terrance McKinney, he does want to stand and bang with you. Like I said, he's not incredibly unorthodox with his striking. He's not going to throw out these insane spinning kicks, these crazy unorthodox strikes, which I like. I don't mind at all. So usually in the UFC, when you see someone have very orthodox, crisp striking from the southpaw stance like Terrance McKinney has, you associate them with very good defense, very good movement, very good head movement, good feints, just good at keeping his opponents at bay. This really is not the case with Terrance McKinney. Terrance McKinney is a guy, he's going to throw out a jab straight. He's going to throw out a straight without really a setup, that left hand straight. The thing is about Terrance McKinney, he drops his hands consistently. Consistently, not only is he dropping his hands, but he's lunging forward. He doesn't really stay in his stance with his feet planted, really just revolving around the balls of his toes to generate that power. He not only does that and rotates his hips, but he also lunges forward with his strikes, which really creates a blatant opening for his opponent to expose. He's a guy who, no matter how the fight's going, he's going to try to walk you down and knock you out, which really leaves his chin open for big strikes. The thing about this style, man, if you want to fight like this at 185, maybe 205, but if you want to fight like this at heavyweight as well, it's fine. You can honestly get to the top 15 fighting like this, being extremely powerful, being extremely young and athletic. At 155 in the unranked part of the division, it's just so super technical. There's just too many guys who have incredible striking like Ismael, like a Drew Dober. Well, Drew Dober is ranked now, but at the time when they fought, they were unranked. That was an incredible fight if you guys haven't watched Terrance McKinney versus Drew Dober. Again, what's the game plan sometimes coming into fights with Terrance McKinney? You're Terrance McKinney's camp. I would like to see him switch coaches and switch camp. How can you go into a fight with Drew, Giga Chad, insane chin Dober and say, yeah, I'm going to knock this guy out in the first round? There's no way. If Islam Makhachev can barely get Drew Dober out of there in 3 rounds. Drew Dober is one of the biggest lightweights of all time. This guy steps into the cage at like 180. I mean, he's absolutely huge in there. The fact that Terrance McKinney goes into that fight with the same exact game plan he has in every single fight, thinking he's just going to run through this unranked guy like he's some regional promotion fighter, just proves that Terrance McKinney really needs a change of scenery in terms of his coaching, in terms of his camp. I want to see him implement some wrestling, some jiu-jitsu in the first round. I want to see him win a first round by grinding it out, sticking on the outside, sticking to a jab, but really having that high guard with your left hand, because he does have a good southpaw jab. He does have very good offensive striking. Just his striking defense is bad. And I'm not even going to outright say, oh, he just has this crazy adrenaline dump and then he gasses out. For a guy who just goes 100 miles per hour in the first 2 minutes of the fight, if you look at him in the third, fourth, fifth minute of the first round, it's not even like he's just gasping for air and he's completely gassed out. So I honestly don't agree with the narrative that Terrance McKinney has a bad gas tank. I actually think he has an incredibly impressive gas tank, considering he's not just drooling on the floor dead after the first 2 minutes of the fight, because I think most fighters, if they dump their adrenaline like Terrance McKinney would, they would be completely dead after the first 2 minutes. So Terrance McKinney, I do think he honestly has a good gas tank. So for me, what is next for Terrance McKinney? Where will Terrance McKinney go? I really hope Terrance McKinney refines his game, starts fighting like a 3-round fighter, and sticks to a jab straight, and really is defensive on the feet more, doesn't leave his chin open, something he also does. He overreacts to feints significantly. So if you're Terrance McKinney, you need to just be more of a defensive fighter. He has really great physical tools. He's still 28 years old, and he's honestly on the verge of getting cut. If he loses his next fight via KO, he might get cut. If he loses his next fight but he looks good, I think the UFC gives him one more chance, but he has to win that next fight. So for Terrance McKinney, I can absolutely see him going on a run and cracking the top 15. If you really had to ask me right now, is Terrance McKinney ever going to crack the top 15 in the UFC? I'm going to say no, just because I think there's guys who are significantly more technical who are still unranked. Now, he does have that potential. He's still an extremely young guy. It's just that he's way too offensive. He doesn't have good defensive principles at all, and it's going to take him, honestly, a couple years to really master those defensive skills, and by then, there's just really bad matchups for Terrance McKinney. I think, honestly, Terrance McKinney is going to win 2 fights, lose 1, win 2 fights, lose 1. I think that's kind of his career trajectory. I think he's a guy in 5 years who could still be in the UFC, but still be an unranked, really fun fighter. A great test for some young fighters coming up into the 155 division. He's going to kind of be that gatekeeper to the top 15. That's kind of where I see his career trajectory going.